A very good morning. Thanks for clicking on to the Thursday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Things are just starting to come together as we go in towards the weekend here, as the colder pattern starts to become a lot more. We're just starting to see everything becoming more fine tuned, of course. 4, 5, 6 days ago, a lot of uncertainty in the overall ideas, but as we go towards the weekend, we are starting to see things just coming together very nicely indeed. We are going to see increasing cold as we press into the weekend here, not just across Scotland, but across the whole of the British Isles, as the winds start to blow harder in from the east here. At the moment, we've got an area of low pressure, as you can see here, over the north coast of Northern Ireland at the moment. We have got a messy mix across the central belt. We've also got some thundery rain coming in from the southwest across England and Wales here. So still in the milder here, but we've got this mess up across the north where the mild is bumping into the cold air. But even across northern Scotland here in Invergordon, for example, we have been seeing rain as opposed to snow. So it's not a solid cold air mass just yet. But as we press through the next 24 hours, we're going into an amber warning here for snowfall. You can see here as we look at the Met Office page here, we've got a yellow warning extending pretty much all across Scotland, but we've got this amber warning here, and which includes myself here in Invergordon, but extending really from just below the north coast all the way down to just north of the central belt here. And the reason for this is because we've got this steady, moist flow coming in off the North Sea here, which is going to grow colder as we go into the weekend here. And of course, it's that persistence in heavy snow across the Grampians and even across the Cairngorms, possibly now starting to extend into low levels as the cold air starts to deepen into the weekend here. We are going to see snow even the low levels here, and this all sets the stage for what is coming late weekend and into next week here. So you can see here as I play through this loop, the persistence in that moisture bumping into the cold air, and it's kind of similar idea to what you would see in North America with lake effect. You've got, of course, bitterly cold air blowing over the Great Lakes, relatively warm Great Lakes, should I say, and that falls as very heavy snow downwind into places like Pennsylvania, New York, for example here. So it's a similar type of idea where you get moist winds blowing over the relatively warm North Sea, and of course as the air grows colder over Scotland, that becomes heavy snowfall, and like really above 200 meters, we're talking at least a foot of snow, potentially even more than that. And even down the low levels, there is the potential for seeing 3 to 6 inches of snow in some places, especially across the north. One thing I want to point out to you is this, of course, is for Saturday here, and the isobars, of course, are more opened up here. The area of low pressure is starting to sink south here. We're still in slightly milder air here across Ireland and across England and Wales. The cold air is generally focused over Scotland, but notice here, watch as this area of low pressure starts to sink south through the second half of this weekend, and you start to see the isobars close up here. Essentially what's happening is that cold air is now starting to sink its way south with the area of low pressure. So you're going to increase the cold, not just across Scotland, but right down across the British Isles here. And we're going to see a very interesting scenario taking place. Once that low gets south, we introduce the cold air to the southern part of the British Isles, and you've got heavy snowfall now starting to move into the southeast of the British Isles here. And with a persistent snowfall here across the southern part of England, we could see some significant snow amounts even to here. So we're going to change things completely with that southward plunge of the low. And of course, we've got that easterly airflow, tightly squeezed isobars, very cold winds blowing all across the eastern side of the British Isles, extending into even western areas like, for example, Glasgow, where you've got that gap in the geography here that can extend snow showers right to the western side of the British Isles. But I think this is a classic setup that, like we've seen in years gone by, with this kind of beast from the east type scenario, where you've got these bitterly cold winds blowing in off the North Sea here. So it's going to be a very interesting next 72 hours, that's for sure, across the British Isles. And this is definitely going by what I kind of anticipated for quite some time, and even extending right the way back to the period in early December when I first released the winter forecast, that I thought this was a scenario that was very possible here. So let's have a look. Let's get back and have a look at the snowfall potential here, if I can try and get the right map, that is, because you can see here, and of course, yeah, there's still model variants, but things are starting to come together. We're starting to get closer and closer to the time frame, and of course, confidence levels start to grow for a particular solution, and that cold solution is definitely here. It's really over the course of the weekend that we see this transition from mild, especially across England and Wales, to much colder, and that is going to extend into next week, folks. I think we do have a bitterly cold spell, the coldest of winter so far. Now, nights aren't going to plunge to -20, and the reason why I'm saying that is because we're going to see wind. So we're going to transport air from deep into the cold continent into the British Isles. It's not until you get settled conditions, clear skies, and you reduce that wind where you maximize your cold nights. We're not going to see that in the next, several days here, because it's going to be too windy for the cold air to settle. So let's skip through this sequence here. This is the snow chart, of course. You can see here the amounts really pile up across the Grampians and across the Highlands. And then as we go in towards the second half of the weekend, you notice here that we're starting to pick up snow here across more of England and indeed even Wales. And by this stage, we could have a pretty good covering across a decent chunk of the British Isles here, in fact. So that is definitely an interesting solution, an interesting scenario. Big amounts here, if you notice here, across the southeast and East Anglia here in particular. But even Greater London, we could see a significant amount of snowfall over the next several days here. So very exciting times to come. There's no question about that. So you can see here, this is off the GFS, this is the 850 millibar temperatures. And there's the mild air, of course, at the moment across Ireland, even into the central belt of Scotland here. This is where we've got that clash zone of cold air mixing with mild air. That's why we're seeing rain down the low levels here. And of course, you've got some very, very mild air across the Mediterranean, and of course, very cold air across Scandinavia. And this is what I was saying in the last video, that the models have a hard time dealing with these massive contrasts in air mass and understanding how to move it around, so to speak. But you can see here real quick, you can see as we skip through the loop, in comes the cold air, and then you've got a tongue of bitterly cold air from Russia blasting its way across Scandinavia and into the British Isles by the time we skip into next week here. So it's going to be a very interesting upcoming week or so across the British Isles. How much snow we get, where sees the snow, how cold we get, that all still remains to be seen. But certainly I like what I'm seeing. We are going to get bitterly cold weather for a period of time. How long it lasts, that's another question, because you can see here that the model then kicks it back out again. But that there is by the time we reach Saturday. So that's nearly 10 days away. And it holds this easterly flow for about a week, which is very impressive indeed, that it maintains this bitterly cold pattern for nearly a week before it then starts to kick out. But then there's going to be question marks over how quickly this air mass does kick out. Of course, the model accuracy is very low by the time you get to this time frame here. So exciting times to come. Keep it right here on YouTube, on markfoganweather.com, and of course on Twitter, where I've got regular updates. We have got lots of winter weather to come, and stay tuned. Hope you have a great day. Bye for now.